through other research, I went into deconstruct two programs. So one is Adobe After Effects, which is the Adobe package's answer to compositing, motion graphics, and visual effects work, and special effects work for the industry. It's used by everyone from college students all the way up to commercial professionals and movies and cinema production companies. And also I looked into a free alternative called Natron. Which is a free alternative to After Effects and other compositing softwares. It can do everything that After Effects can do at the same quality, which is very good, I believe. Now, starting off, we'll talk about After Effects, then go on to Natron. So After Effects, to buy After Effects, first of all, is to get After Effects to pay monthly. Every year pay monthly is £19.97 a month, or to pay once annually, so every year, is £238.22, which is a lot considering that some of the more popular YouTube channels who use free software already or After Effects earn about £2 to £3 a video, if not maybe £10 or £20 a video, which means in a year, if they make a video every week, they could earn a few grand at most, which is nowhere near a full-time job. Which means that most creatives using the Adobe package will probably be running off benefits or some similar package or way of getting money, whereas Natron and other programs are free, which in my eyes should give them a much bigger edge over the paid programs, but it doesn't, which is what my project is about. So starting off, I'll look into the After Effects package. We have the standard file edit bar across the top. So we had the file tab and edit tabs that give you what you would usually expect in a program. So the open option, the open, save, file options, print, copy, and encoding options, which basically lets you change the amount of data and different formats your project works in. We then go to the composition tab, which gives us new compositions, which are kind of new documents within the project. So working in different compositions, we can't cross things in compositions. There's a feature in After Effects which is called pre-comp, which pre-composes files into a kind of mini composition which can be inside a composition, kind of like layers on Photoshop, which leads us to the layers tab, which gives us actual new layers like in Photoshop, so we can start layering images and such in the editing window to change things. And the animation tab, which is the last tab we can talk about on this bar, gives us access to the various animation presets, as well as keyframes for animations, and creating our own text. From there we will come down the left hand side to the effect control box. So the effect control box does exactly what it sounds like. When you set an effect on anything in the window, your controls will appear in the effect control box, and you can affect the effects any way you wish. In this box you can also affect the object, so its size, its rotation, opacity, these kind of things. We also in there get the project window, or the project box. This is essentially a viewer, so when we put things into the next box, which is the asset box, such as videos or images, when we select those in this in the project window will appear a preview of said content of the video, or a image of the image, which when added to the asset box you can then drag down into the timeline and effect box, timeline and assets box that's attached to it. So the timeline and subsequent box have many different features on them. So the timeline itself gives you the time that each thing runs for, and you can very easily just increase the length that it runs for if it's not a video with a set length. Images, you can just increase how long they are on screen for. Whereas the box attached to it, which is a different type of effect box, gives you the name of the asset, where it is in the timeline, and then drop down menus. The drop down menus give you all the controls that the effect controls give you, the animation tab and everything in there, as well as parenting, modes, and so on. So you can change the size, add effects, change the keyframing in the timeline, and so on. We then have the very big centerpiece of the entire program, the composition box, or the composition window. In here, the only thing that you will see is the finished composition that you are working on. This means any changes you do in any other boxes will, if they are working and you have done them correctly, appear in the composition window. This is one of the reasons why After Effects is an incredibly RAM heavy program. Going on to the left side of the thing now, we now have the paragraph constraints or controls, which are basically used to, like in Word, paragraph and set different paragraph spacings and such for text. Pretty boring one. Above that we have the infamous effect box, which allows you to search the reservoir of effects in After Effects and apply them to your footage. You can apply anything from 3D images, getting 3D models into your composition and having those set up, or generating clouds, distorting images, glows, and other effects similar. Above that we had the preview controls, which essentially just allow us to pause, rewind, skip parts in the timeline, which is also what the arrowhead and node in the timeline gives us access to. above that we have the information page, which gives us cursor information. So as you hover your cursor over things, it'll give us the RGB and A readout under the color, under the cursor. So it'll give us the RGB, which is the color, and the A is the opacity, I believe, of the asset or object we are hovering over in the composition window. It also gives us readouts for the other parts of the screen, which I always find interesting. It will also give us precise coordinates on screen of the cursor. In case we're doing something where we're mapping out with our cursor, we need to note down the coordinates and have whatever we want jump to that bit. Under that we also have, above that we have the search help, which pairs with the help tab in the top bar, which just contains useful hints and information on what everything does. And that is basically all you need to know about After Effects and its look and design. There are hundreds of effects in it, way too many to go over in one session or one project. You could probably start an entire project about After Effects and its effects and what it can be used for. Going on from there then to Natron and its usage. The first thing you'll notice with Natron is it doesn't have a timeline. And it doesn't have that many windows. In fact, it only has entirely 5 boxes. And I lied in that first part. It does have a timeline. It's not the same timeline as in After Effects. So After Effects uses the standard timeline video editing idea that most video editors use, whereas Natron is one of the more different ones, and it uses a node-based editing system. So it will, in its main box, it has the viewer node, which connects to the viewer window, which is similar to the composition window in After Effects. The viewer window above has, above the viewer window, you have some controls for the viewer window. So it gives you options to change its RGB values, change it from RGB to other color settings, darken it, lighten it, change its opacity, increase the opacity, lock it, change the layer it's working on, so on. So on the right side, along top, we have file and stuff like normal. So the file is not quite the same as After Effects. I'm lying. It's completely the same as every other program: save, close, open, programs, projects. The edit only gives you the options of simply preferences, undo move nodes, and redo. Basically lets you undo, redo, and change how your settings are set up. We then have display. Well, we have layout, but that's covered a bit later because that's another thing. Display, which tells us everything we need to know about making new viewers, changing viewers, showing project. It will show us project settings if you click on it. We then have the render tab, which shows us where the renders go to, what the renders are rendering at, and allow us to change those. And we have the very useful cache tab, which allows us to change, essentially clear the caches in the program. So caches are generally temporary storage for files, and if you clear them, it'll get rid of the temporary files which aren't needed for working programs or working the project you're working on. It just gives the program an extra little bit to read off of. we'll then go from there to the left side again, like with After Effects, and go through each of the things. So the first thing we have is the image tools, which gives us access to the color, to pictures that we can put up. So checkerboard, backgrounds, color bars, color wheels, as well as adding other images from outside the program. So color bars, color wheel, and checkerboard. So color bars are the standard kind of image you will get on TV screens and stuff in movies where they've just blacked out, pre-emergency warning color bar kind of thing. Error bars. After that we have the drawing tools, which lets us add light warp, noise in plasma and radial stuff, as well as gradients, which in this program are known as ramps. This also gives us the access to the rectangle tool and the roto brush tool. From here we go into the time tools, which is lets us change frame range, time blur. It lets us change the time of the node we've added, so how long it lasts, how long it affects, and all that lovely stuff. There is a layers tab, but that effectively just changes what layer each node operates on, which you can change in the node window yourself by connecting them in a certain way. So from there we will go on to the color window. So in color we can do all the color correct systems, add actual gradients in color rather than ramps, which are black and white, change saturation, transform, vector the colors, hue, contrast, and generally change the colors to what we want them to be in our composition. We then have the filter tools, which allows us to add distortions, bloom, blur, chroma blur, which is essentially blur but going through colors, as well as glows, rays, matrix, which is the matrix from the Matrix movie edition, as well as shades, shapes, sharpen, blur, and all that lovely stuff. We then have the keyer tools, which in After Effects is chroma key. In Natron is just called keyer tools. It gives us the chroma keyer, which allows us to pick a color to filter out. This is generally used for green or blue screens in movies to filter out the background. You can use the dispel tool to change how much comes through, how much is removed. The hue key allows you to choose different hues of the color you're trying to filter out. So in After Effects, the key light effect, which is what you had to apply, doesn't have this feature. So keying is a very close masking of your character, then keying it to make sure you get everything, whereas in Natron you can do it straight off the bat, adding different hues to key out and adding hues not to key out. So you can select hues on your character that you don't want removed, so you don't get parts of your character phasing in and out of existence. After the key tools, we have the merger tools, which essentially just allow you to merge nodes with each other whilst keeping effects active, or removing the effects when you merge them if that's what you would like to do. After that we have the transform tools, which are the simple resize, move, rotate, crop, as well as having these for not just 2D objects, but you can do it in 3D as well. Whereas After Effects, you still have to add the Cinema 4D plugin, which only works with Cinema 4D stuff, and is actually a pain to insert assets and use them in that. Going on from there, we have the node box itself, which essentially gives you in the box the main viewer, which is the composition window, as I said, in the center, and it gives you the two nodes that connect to it. So node number 1, node number 2. Node number 1 is stuff going into the viewer, and node number 2 stays unconnected, because node number 2 is what the viewer of the product is going to see directly from the viewer. So the way the node window is usually directed to be set up is you have your footage, and then under it you have your effects, your color corrections, and so on. Some people like to have their footage, then a row of color correction, effect, and such underneath it, and then adding color corrections and other effects to each of those as they please. Whilst the After Effects timeline kind of stays neat enough that you can go down it and pick out what you want from it, nodes, if you aren't careful, because the lines going across the screen get very messy very quickly. The timeline in the natron is very simply used to scan through the footage, make sure footage is playing when you want it, and to play and pause on certain bits of footage. It isn't used for editing directly, so you don't have any effect controls on it at all. It is literally used as going through and around. So the next one after that we have is the settings. Project settings. Project settings basically allows us to change the output format from whatever quality we want it to be to whatever, change the frame range. So the timeline shows us the frame range, so from frame 1 to, if your timeline was set up to 100, frame 100 for the whole thing, frame 50 for half of it, and you can do frame 50 to 100 if you aren't happy with the first half of it, that kind of thing. If you lock the range, it locks it to that, you don't edit it at all. After that we have the frame rate, which basically says how many frames a second. So if you have 50 frames and you say 50 frames a second, your video is going to be 1 second long and play incredibly fast. After that you also have GPU rendering, which basically allows the program to run off of a graphic processor instead of just your standard processor, which alleviates a lot of the RAM use that After Effects usually does for this one. You have the project paths, which just tell you where the files are coming from and where the files are saving to. And above that you have viewers, layout, UT, and information, as well as Python. So viewers just lets you look at different views and different sides of your project if you're working in a kind of 3D format. And then info gives you project name, you can edit this as you wish, the product path, so where it's saving to, which you get in settings. Saved with, so it'll tell you this version that you're saved with, the author, the last author, when it was created, when it was last saved, and comments about the project and project. Python is use of the Python coding language, so you can code movements for motion graphics if you are doing motion graphics, or images on the screen, instead of just doing clicks